So as I mentioned, today we'll be covering design review. We have 3 different workflows in the design review business process that are available for every project. And so you'll have to determine the correct workflow to use based on your project. So just as a quick overview of the workflows, let's start with the most complicated one. Which are those projects that are using a design firm. So you'll get the document set from the designer. And for now, since they're not in the system, the project coordinator would create the record and load those documents and attach them to the record in Unifier. And then send to the project manager to review for completeness. So this is just an initial review before it goes and gets sent out for everyone to look at, just to make sure we've got a complete set, all the documents are there, and we don't need to go have that back and forth with the designer before we start sharing those with the reviewers. Now, when it comes to actually reviewing the document, we're going to be using Adobe Shared Review, whatever you're using outside of the system for the actual markup of the drawing. In this instance, Unifier does have its own built-in markup tool, but it does have its limitations, and it's rather simplistic. And the biggest thing is being able to get those comments out. So for really small projects with no design firm, no in-house design, where it's just a scope development form and maybe a sketch, we'll be using the Unifier markup tool. But for anything with a design firm or anything with design documents, even if it's an in-house design, you'll be utilizing Adobe Shared Review or Bluebeam, depending on the project. So after you review for completeness, you'll send as notify reviewers. So what we're doing here is we're notifying all the reviewers who need to then, log into that Bluebeam session or Adobe Reviewed, share a review and make their markups and comments. If there's any issues with it not being complete, there's this revise loop. Once they're in the system, that'll make more sense to kick it back to the designer to attach missing documents. But for now, that may be happening via email, and you could just directly attach those documents here without having to send it back. What's the review? And so and just to clarify, so once we notify reviewers, it's going outside of Unifier now. So that markup and review process is happening in Bluebeam or Adobe for a set period of time. And then those comments will get put into the comments spreadsheet. And sorry, just to reiterate, creation is going to be the project coordinator or the designer once they're in the system. The PM or planner will be reviewing the document set for completeness. Outside of Unifier, I don't know if anybody wants to chime in, but that process wouldn't change. But once it's done, the goal is to then attach those comments to the record in Unifier. So that we can use the workflow to track the overall progress, make sure we have all the design documents and the comments together, and we can track the response. So this review and upload comments step Oops, sorry. And I'm just double checking to make sure I don't misspeak. Is the project coordinator. So once the comments are received, we'll attach those to the record in Unifier. If for whatever reason there's an issue, there is the option to send it back. So maybe it went out for comment, and then even though we had that review for completeness, we realized, oh wait, we can't complete this review because we're missing some critical document. It can be sent back to add that document. From here, we'll submit the comments to the comments response, which would be the designer when they're in the system. Right now, this is just going to go to the project coordinator. The designer is going to respond to those comments, and then we'll upload and attach the comments response to the record in Unifier, documenting the response to each of the comments. The PC will then submit the response. This goes to the comments response resolution. And this is a consensus step. So this is going out to whomever added comments. And this was going to document that their comments were responded to. So everybody has to select approved. If anybody selects revise, it goes back to comments response until all those comments are responded to. But once all the comments are responded to, and of course, there also is the option to just move it along if you decide to just send it to the PM. So it won't necessarily have to be stuck in a forever loop if somebody is just not ever going to be happy. But it is consensus on this step, so just be aware that whoever you assign it to, they all have to select approved in order to move the process along. Once it's approved, depending on whether or not the design phase is final, so whether it's the final review for SD, DD, etc., we'll go to the issue design stage approval step, which goes to the PM or planner to attach the design stage approval form. That's not currently being generated by Unifier, so that's still going to be a document that's created outside of Unifier and then attached to the record. They'll then issue approval, and then depending on whether or not we're at 100% CD, it will go one of two ways. If we're not at 100% construction documents, that will just end the process for that review cycle. If we are, it will go to the submit for construction set, which will go to the project coordinator to attach that for construction set, which will then be submitted to the PM. Or the appropriate reviewer to make sure that that issued for construction set is complete. There's a little revise loop if there's any issues with it. And then once it's approved, it ends. So again, this is kind of tracking kind of the life cycle of the design review, the actual markup and commenting in the case of a project with a design firm is occurring outside of Unifier. And of course, we're getting those documents from the designer outside of Unifier, but this allows us to bring all that together in one record, track each iteration of that comments log until there's full resolution. And then depending on where we're at, the issue, the design stage approval, and the for construction set. So as the project goes along, you'll have multiple records for each review that occurs. In the case of an in-house design, it's fairly similar. The only difference is we don't have that design stage approval or issued for construction. So we're just looking at that. Again, reviewing for completeness. It will go out to Adobe or Bluebeam, depending on the project. We'll upload those comments, track the response, and then ensure that there is response resolution. There might be multiple iterations of that comments response log to make sure all the comments are responded to. The last workflow is when there's no design firm. So I alluded to this earlier. This is for most small projects that don't have a formal design. This is just a scope development form. And maybe a sketch from the PM or somebody. And this would be the instance where we could use the Unifier markup tool. Or we won't be covering how to use the markup tool in detail in this training. There's a separate training just on using the markup tool itself. In today's session, we will just want to make sure that we cover the different workflows and so you understand when to use the Unifier viewer versus not. But in this case, with no design firm, this is really being a process managed by the project manager. So they're going to attach their scope development form and any sketch, and then they can send it to reviewers in Unifier. They will select who it goes to. All reviewers are automatically added to all projects as soon as they're created, so we don't have to worry about making sure we've got the right folks internally added. Just note that this step is consensus. So if you're going to send it to 2 or 3 people, you want to make sure that they're going to respond. If they don't, it will get stuck. They have 2 options, submit comments or revise. And we have a separate training for reviewers. We instruct them only to use revise if something appears incomplete or missing that doesn't allow them to do their review. Like they were sent it, but there was nothing attached, then they would send it back for revision. If there was some change needed in the design, they would just add their comments and submit comments. So that's kind of the distinction here. And then once all comments are submitted, it goes back to the PM for the comments response. In the markup tool in Unifier, you can add comments to respond. And then it will go back out to the reviewers for resolution to say, yes, you've responded to my issue, or no, you missed something. Once it passes those reviewers, then it is approved and ends the workflow. So for today's training, I'm going to send one record through the No Design workflow, No Design Firm, and then we're also going to send one through the Design Firm workflow. So we're going to start with kind of the more simple process for smaller projects, and then we'll do the more complex process for larger projects with a formal design. Okay. So I'm in my training project. Design review can be found under scope management, design review. For anyone following along in the help file or wants the section to refer to, it's 3.7.6, completing a no design firm review. So you'll note that when you click create, you have three options. So these are the three options we just reviewed: design firm, in-house design, and no design firm. So I'm going to click on no design firm. So again, this would be the PM or the planner, depending on the project. The first form is fairly simple. It's just asking if we've attached our scope development form. And then it's asking for a project summary. This project summary description will auto-populate from project information. So if that's sufficient for your needs, you can leave it as is, but it is editable if you need to change it. So I'm going to go ahead and attach. I've just got a fairly simple sketch. This would be the PDF file that I sent out. The floor 01. So we'll just say that that's our scope development form and sketch. So yes, it has been attached. You'll note that there's a sub-consultants tab. This won't be used in the case of no design firm. There's just unfortunately not a way for us to hide that. This is more for the other workflows when there is a design firm and we just want to track and note who the sub-consultants are. There's a landscape architect, an environmental sub-consultant, just to list their name and contact information. So we'll take a look at that in the design firm workflow. Okay, so again, as PM planner, I've attached my scope development form, and that's really all I'm doing at this point. I'm going to go ahead and send. So only one option: submit for review and comment. It does create a default task due date of 5 business days. And as I said, all the reviewers are already preloaded in all the projects in production, but this is a consensus workflow. So if anybody is doing this in your training project, I would recommend just sending it to yourself. I'm going to demonstrate sending it to multiple people so you can see the impact. So if I click the picker button here, it's going to pull up the full list of people I can add. Just going to change it to users. I don't have a lot of folks in my training project, but again, in production, you'll have all of the reviewers. I'm going to send it to myself and to Lainey. So this is one way to add multiple people. If you haven't done that before, you can hold Control or Shift and select multiple people, and then just use the arrow to move them over and click Done. The other way is to simply search from the bar if you haven't done that. So I can remove people by just clicking the X. So if I wanted to just search for me, I could just start typing my name. And then to add somebody else, I just need to click to the right and start typing again. So if you want to just save a few clicks, not have to pull up that full list. All right. I'm going to send this out to my reviewers. So Lainey, if your internet hasn't given out yet, I'm going to go ahead and perform mine. I'm going to ask you to hold off on doing your task until I'm done so I can show what happens when the reviewers respond at different times. So I'll let you know when to complete that. The reviewer will get a task. Of course, they'll get an email as well that they have a task. If you've sent this to yourself, you'll have this in your task list. As a design review sent for review and comment, and we see our task due date there as October 2nd. I'm going to double click to open this and then accept the task. You will see the Unifier markup tool, but I'm not going to go through it again in detail as there is a separate training for that. So we see in our attachments, we have a little paperclip icon, tells us that there's an attachment. That's the clue to the reviewer that there is a document. From here, they can click on the gear icon and select review, which will pull up the document viewer. If there were multiple pages, you would see a little left and right arrow to flip through multiple pages. In this case, it's just one PDF page. I can zoom in. And then I'm going to add a comment. One thing we always instruct reviewers to do is just as we've mentioned in other trainings, in certain cases, the default for comments is hide. We always want to make sure to unhide. So I'm going to go ahead and add a markup here and associate that with a comment. That adds my comment down below. The push pin tells me that there's an annotation on the drawing. So if I select that comment, it will show me where that annotation is. I can add multiple comments. So I can make comments about different parts of the drawing. And if I need to remove and edit, again, different training to go through this in more detail, but this is where they'll be adding comments. And when they're done, they can just close the window. There's no save. But there's a comments column in the attachments log. And once that's checked, we know, okay, somebody's added comments to this document. Now, if I didn't have any comments, it would be good for me to add a comment on this attachment saying that I don't have any comments so that when I send it on, there isn't any confusion that I didn't add my comments. Another thing we're instructing reviewers to do is to make sure they add their comments on the attachment and not on the comments tab. This is a separate list of comments that is not specific to any attachment. We have had a situation where a design review went out to multiple reviewers and one reviewer added comments to the attachment and the other one added it in the comments tab. So it then becomes kind of difficult to track if they're in multiple places. All right, I've added my comment, so I'm going to go ahead and click send. Again, I have that revise option if for whatever reason I got this task and there was no attachment or there was the wrong attachment. But in this case, I'm going to submit my comments, even if I didn't have any. And this goes back to the PM or planner. I will click send. Now, if I go back to my design review log, and again, this is a log of all design reviews in this project. So in a simple project, you won't have very many, but in larger projects, you'll see all of the design phase reviews. If I open up my design review, I can see there are comments on it. If I go to workflow progress, and here I'm just pointing out the idea of consensus. So here we see that I created the record and I sent it to myself and Laney for review and comment. So Eric's completed his task, but Laney hasn't started. So it stays in this review and comment until everybody responds, which is different from most workflow steps that we're using in other business processes where it just requires one person to take action. So Laney, I'll have you go ahead and complete your step. Now, we don't necessarily need to wait for everyone to be done in order to see the comments. So as soon as I've submitted my comments, those are visible here on the PDF. I just won't see Laney's until she submits. She can see mine because I've submitted them. So that's something to be aware of. If you send it to multiple reviewers, they can see the others reviewers' comments once they have submitted them, meaning they've sent the task or they sent the record back in workflow. So if I open this, I should see my comment. Oh, it looks like Laney's done hers, so I see hers as well. I have a push pin icon, which tells me there's an annotation related to mine, but I don't have one for Laney, so I know she didn't add any annotation to the drawing. If I go back to the workflow progress, okay, now I can see Laney has completed her task 2 minutes after I did. So if we recall the workflow, we just completed the review and comment step, and now it's come back to the PM for comments response. So the project manager gets a task. They'll accept. So I just got it back from my reviewers. So the first thing I'd want to do is open up the drawing to see what my comments were. I can see all the comments. And I will only see annotations if I select a comment. I will see the associated annotation. I won't see all annotations because that would be difficult to tell which comment was associated with which attachment because the comments just show as a list. And so that's why you have to click on an individual comment to see the annotation. One limitation with this is that there's no way to thread comments, as it were. So if somebody saw my comment and wanted to comment on it, they would have to just explain in their comment that they're responding to mine. Again, this is just a no design firm for really small projects. So ideally you wouldn't have that many reviewers, but that is a current limitation, and that's one of the reasons we're not using it for the other project situations. So I've seen Laney didn't have any comments, but Eric didn't like my column location. So if I had a new sketch that moved that column, I could upload that. by simply revising this and then finding the new drawing. I'm just going to reselect the same drawing because I don't have a corrected drawing, that it would be the new version of the drawing or the sketch or the scope development form if there was an issue with the scope. And I'll click send. And so this goes to submit response. So this is going to go back to any of the reviewers who had comments to share your response. Now, Lainey didn't have any comments, so I don't need to send it back to her. She was already fine with it as is. I could include her again to see the update. But in this case, I'm just going to send it to myself. And this comments response resolution has a different, this is a 3-day turnaround. The comments response resolution is also a consensus workflow step. So again, if Eleni did have comments as well, and I sent them back to both, they would both need to say, yep, we're happy with what you've done. In this case, I've only sent it to myself. So I get a task design review sent for comments response resolution. So now I can see what the PM responded with to my comment. Whether that was a new attachment or an updated attachment or a response to my comment. I would have to check the attachment and the comments to see. So in this case, I'll open up the floor plan. We're just going to pretend that the column has moved. And I'm okay with it. I don't have any issues and I click send, I can approve or note it as approved. If I did have a problem, like my comment wasn't addressed or I didn't think it was addressed to my satisfaction, I could select revise, which kicks it back to the PM. So if I select revise, you see it goes back to comments response to the PM. If I select approved, it just goes to the end. We'll click send. Drops out of the reviewer's task. And now the status of the design review in the design review log is approved. The approval date, it just captures the date and time of that last task we took to approve for the comments response resolution. Okay, so that's no design firm. Again, smaller, simple projects, no design, usually just a sketch or just a scope development form. Next, I'm going to walk a record through the design firm workflow. Now, typically you wouldn't use both workflows in the same project. You would only have one or the other, but all three are available. So for projects with the design firm, we'll select the design firm workflow. And again, this is tracking the overall process. In this case, it is not necessarily the design review markup itself. So the project coordinator will create and attach the set of documents from the designer. So I'm going to go ahead and attach I'm just going to use that same floor 01. We'll say this is my design set. And then on the form, we'll indicate who the designer is. So we'll search for our design vendor. And we'll indicate a contact name for the design review. So if there were any issues with the design set, who do we need to contact? The project summary, again, populates from project information, but it is editable if you need to change it. And then block 3, design phase. This is where we'll indicate attributes of the design set. So what design phase are we in? Concept, schematic, design development, construction documents, or sometimes we need to review CMGC bid package or just a scope change, depending on the project. I'm going to select schematic design and then indicate the percentage. Please note there is some special behavior here, so let me clear this out. So if I select CMGC bid package, I can still indicate a percentage, but I won't be filling out if this is the last review for the design phase, and I'll be required to put in a bid package number and bid package description. If it's a scope change, the percentage and bid package information all becomes read-only. I just put in a data documents. In this case, we're going to go with schematic design. Any of the design phases, this bid package information will be read-only. That's only available for CMGC packages, bid packages. Oops. So I'm going to select 35% and then indicate whether or not this is the last review for the design phase, which will require us to issue the design stage approval. I'm going to select yes, and then indicate the date of the documents. Let's say they were just dated yesterday. Now, if I had more than one contact, or if there were sub-consultants, specialty sub-consultants, AV, environmental, we can add them here. So I'm just going to add one as an example. This could also be a place where you would add other contacts for the main designer as well. You could add them here if you needed more space. So again, just the company name and then the contact's name, title, and contact information. I'm just going to click save because I'm only adding one, but it's a line item form, so you could add as many contents or consultants or contacts as needed. All right, I'm going to change this to 100% SD. Okay, so again, the project coordinator is filling this out and attaching the design documents. We'll click send and then review for completeness. So this will go to the PM or planner. I'm going to send it to myself. And then send. So as the PM, I get a task. Oh, sorry, just catching up on the chat. So the PC, the project coordinator will already know the drawings are complete. Right now, the project coordinator isn't available to be selected on the review for completeness step. So we may have to take a look at that. All right, so I got a task to review for complete as the PM. The project coordinator told me it's complete, so I'm just going to send this along. So I accepted the task. I can't change anything. It's just meant to be a review step, so I could see the information as entered and what was attached. And then click send. Two options here. Again, revise if there was some issue with the documents, they were not complete, or notify reviewers. So again, because the review, the actual markup and commenting in this case is happening outside of Unifier, and some of those reviewers are going to not be Unifier users, we'll need to notify those reviewers outside of Unifier. And so we're just, as just a reminder to notify reviewers. It creates a 10-day, 10 business day task due date. And then they'll click send. As you saw, the form was read only. So in this step, I couldn't make any revisions. I can only send it back for revision. So I would then add a general comment to let the PC know what to change. Okay. So as the PM, I sent this along to the review and upload comments, which is a task assigned for the project coordinator. Now, the review is happening in Bluebeam or in Adobe shared review. So this task will sit out there until that process is complete. Once the review is complete, the PC will then go into Unifier and accept the task. Project coordinator accepts task. And the only new field here to fill out is have we attached the comments. So we would extract the comments or any references from the review process and attach the comments log. So I'm going to click my paperclip here and browse for my comments log. I sent out just kind of a blank Excel sheet as an example. So you can see that with different versions. So this is my first version of the comments log that I just wanted to show you how to replace that. If there's back and forth with the comments log and you need to update it. So, with the response, sorry. So right now this is just the comments. Have you attached the comments? Yes. PC then clicks send. Now we have two options here: submit comments or revise. We got through the design review, so we don't need to revise. But if there were any issues or if it was sent out accidentally and we weren't actually ready for design review, you could send it back. Otherwise, we're going to submit the comments. This goes back to the creator. So in this case, the project coordinator. Once the designer's in the system, this will go back to the designer. So for now, then the PC gets a new task for comments response. The designer is going to be responding to those comments outside of Unifier, but we want to make sure that we log them in Unifier. So we have not only the comments, but also the comments response. So the PC will open up the design review task sent for comments response and accept. Now, outside of Unifier, we would have gotten those response. We would have an updated comments log. So I can actually replace this with the new, with response. So if I click the wheel and go to revise, and again, and select browse, I can then attach an updated version of this. So let's say this is version 2. And this has got our responses. The reason for doing that is so that the system can track each iteration of the log and how many times we've needed to go through and update it. And then also for history, because it's going to retain each one of those versions in the system. So you can always refer to the earlier log and then see the iteration. Because by the time you get to perhaps version 4 and you don't even see your comment anymore, you're like, did I add that? Or did it get lost? You can go back to the earlier version and see. So the PC attaches the comments response and then indicates that yes, they have done so. And then they will send to comments response resolution. And so this is to track that all the comments responses have been resolved. Right now, you can select anybody from the PM planner or reviewers group to send this to. Again, not all reviewers are going to be in the system, and that review is occurring in Adobe or Bluebeam outside of Unifier. So I'm just going to send this to myself as the project manager. Project manager will get a task for comments response resolution. They'll accept the task. They can see the comments and the comments response, and then can attach the comments response resolution. So Catherine, maybe you can respond to me in the chat. Is the comments response resolution a separate form, or is that just additional information in the comments log? Or maybe I'll unmute you, Catherine. Is the comments response resolution, sorry, is that a separate form, or is that the same log just with updated resolution? Okay, well, we'll attach the response resolution. If we need to revise the log, it's the same. Select the gear icon and revise. And we could select the new version. If we did need to, if we didn't have resolution, if there was whatever issue, I'm going to go ahead and select yes. When we send, there is the option to revise. Which will send it back. Again, that comments response in the log is happening outside of Unifier. So hopefully you're not going to be completing this until the resolution is complete, and you're just going to upload that final version and mark it as approved. Now, because we've indicated that this is the final review for the design, it is going to go back to the PM and planner to issue the design stage approval letter, which I believe is a template Meridian, but that's created outside of Unifier, and we're just going to go ahead and attach that. So the PM or planner gets a task design review sent for issue design stage approval. I'm just going to pull up the workflow again to show where we're at. So we've gone through the review for completeness. The review has occurred outside of Unifier, and we've uploaded those comments. The PC has. They've submitted those comments. Outside of Unifier, those comments are being responded to. And once all the comments responses are complete, the PC will then upload the comments response and send it to the PM and planner for resolution. And now we've indicated that it's approved, and because the design phase we marked is final, it's going to our issue design stage approval. So I get a task, issue design stage approval. I'm given a task due date of 5 business days or working days. So have you attached the design stage approval that you would create then outside of Unifier So I can go ahead and click browse. I don't have a design stage approval, so I just created a blank Word document as my design stage approval. Then I can indicate yes that I've attached it, and then indicate what that approval date is. Go ahead and click send, which ends the workflow. I'm going to bring the workflow back up. So we're at 100% SD. If we had been at 100% CD, it would then go on to the submit for construction set. And we make sure that we've got that issued for construction stamp set from the designer and the project coordinator. Would then have this task to attach that. It gets sent to the PM for completeness. And then once marked as approved, we'll end the workflow. And that's the design firm review workflow. The in-house design, very similar. It just doesn't have the design stage or issued for construction steps. But the actual commenting and response and resolution are the same. All right, I'm going to stop the recording